Have you ever scrolled through the news and seen headlines about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, feeling like you're missing the full story? It's a complex situation, one that feels almost impossible to grasp without understanding its deep, historical roots. Let's take a journey back in time, not to take sides, but to understand the why behind the headlines. Our story begins over a century ago, in the early 1900s. The land we now know as Israel and Palestine was then part of the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, diverse communities, including both Jews and Arabs, lived in this region. The dynamic began to shift after World War I, when the British took control. During this period, Jewish immigration to the area started to increase. This was driven by Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish national homeland, and it gained immense urgency during and after the Holocaust, as survivors sought a safe refuge from the horrors they had endured. The growing Jewish population and the existing Arab communities led to rising tensions. Both groups had deep historical and cultural connections to the land, and both had aspirations for self-determination. By 1947, the situation had reached a boiling point. The newly formed United Nations stepped in with a proposal, the Partition Plan. The idea was to divide the land into two separate states, one Jewish and one Arab, while keeping the city of Jerusalem under international administration due to its significance to Christians, Jews, and Muslims. This plan became a critical turning point. Jewish leaders, eager to establish a state, accepted the proposal. However, Arab leaders and the broader Arab world rejected it. They argued it was fundamentally unfair, as it allocated a significant portion of the land to a minority of the population and displaced the existing Arab majority. This disagreement set the stage for what was to come. On May 14, 1948, the day the British Mandate ended, Jewish leaders officially declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The very next day, a coalition of neighboring Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, invaded, aiming to prevent the creation of the new state. This was the start of the First Arab-Israeli War. The outcome was not what the Arab nations had anticipated. The newly formed Israeli army not only survived the invasion, but also managed to expand its territory beyond what the UN Partition Plan had originally proposed. For Israelis, this was a war of independence and survival, but for Palestinians, it was a profound tragedy. During the conflict, an estimated 750,000 Palestinians either fled the violence or were forced from their homes and lands. This mass displacement is known to Palestinians as the Nakba, which translates to the catastrophe. These refugees and their descendants now number in the millions, many still living in refugee camps across the Middle East, dreaming of a right to return that remains a core, unresolved issue in the conflict. The decades that followed 1948 were not peaceful. They were punctuated by more wars, such as the Six-Day War in 1967, where Israel captured the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula. This occupation of Palestinian territories has been a central point of contention ever since. Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza have lived under military occupation, facing restrictions on movement, settlement expansion, and a lack of political freedom. This has led to waves of resistance, including the First and Second Intifadas, which were major Palestinian uprisings against Israeli rule. Now, let's zoom in on Gaza, a name that frequently dominates the news. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew its settlers and troops from the Gaza Strip. Hopes for a new beginning were short-lived. Following a brief but intense internal conflict between Palestinian factions, the militant group Hamas violently seized control of Gaza in 2007. In response, Israel and Egypt imposed a strict land, air, and sea blockade on the territory, citing security concerns and the need to prevent weapons from reaching Hamas. This blockade has had a devastating impact on the 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza. The economy has collapsed, unemployment is rampant, and access to clean water, electricity, and medical care is severely limited. The relationship between Israel and Hamas-controlled Gaza has been defined by a brutal, repeating cycle of violence. Hamas and other militant groups fire rockets into Israeli towns, causing fear and civilian casualties. Israel responds with massive airstrikes on Gaza, which, while targeting militants, have resulted in a staggering number of civilian deaths and widespread destruction of infrastructure. So, what is this all about at its very core? It's a struggle between two peoples who feel a profound, non-negotiable connection to the same small piece of land. It's a clash over fundamental needs. For Israelis, the need for security in a historically hostile region. For Palestinians, the need for freedom, self-determination, and an end to occupation. It's a heartbreaking story of generational trauma, survival, and resistance, where politics, religion, and identity are all intertwined. The greatest tragedy is that the ones who suffer most are ordinary people. The families trying to raise their children, the kids who have never known a day of true peace, the communities on both sides living under constant threat and fear. Understanding this history doesn't magically solve the conflict. It's far too complicated for simple answers. But it does help us understand why finding peace is so incredibly difficult, and why empathy, dialogue, and a commitment to human dignity are more crucial than ever. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to understand this complex issue. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next one.